There is this very unique, very modern kind of anxiety that hits when you're standing in the skincare aisle of a pharmacy.
No, absolutely. The paradox of choice.
Yeah, exactly. You're holding two seemingly identical plastic bottles. One says, like, SPF 50 broad spectrum, and the other says PA plus mineral defense.
Right. And you have no idea what either of those actually mean.
None at all. The fluorescent lights are buzzing. You just want to go to the beach. And suddenly, choosing a lotion feels like taking an advanced chemistry exam while wearing a swimsuit.
It is incredibly overwhelming. And honestly, you aren't alone in feeling that way. I mean, we go to the store expecting to buy a simple, straightforward shield against the sun.
Right.
But what we're actually looking at on those shelves is a highly engineered, globally debated chemical matrix.
Which is wild. And that is exactly our mission for today's deep dive.
Yeah.
We have a massive stack of research detailing the science, the surprisingly ancient history, and the massive global impact of sunscreen.
It's a huge topic.
It really is. We are going to decode this incredibly complex world for you. We want to move past the confusing marketing claims, figure out how these lotions actually work on a cellular level, and wade into the very real environmental controversies happening under the ocean's surface.
Because it's not just about us.
Exactly. By the time we're done here, you are going to understand exactly what you're putting on your skin and why.
Which is vital because the story of sun protection isn't just a story about avoiding a temporary sunburn. It is fundamentally about understanding how humans have interacted with our local star for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And how our bodies cope with the radiation it constantly throws at us.
Let's actually start there, in the past. Because before we get to the complex chemical formulas sitting in our beach bags today, we have to look at how humans historically tried to solve the exact same problem, the sun's relentless heat and light.
Right, people have always needed to go outside.
Exactly. It turns out ancient civilizations were already formulating their own early versions of SPF. We're talking about ancient Greeks slathering themselves in olive oil and ancient Egyptians using complex extracts of rice, jasmine, and lupine plants to protect their skin.
And what is truly fascinating about those early attempts is that they weren't just guessing.
Really? I kind of assumed it was trial and error.
Well, a bit, but they weren't just throwing random plants onto their skin. Many of these natural compounds have inherent photoprotective properties.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like rice bran, for example. It contains compounds that naturally absorb certain UV rays. Olive oil provides a rudimentary physical barrier while delivering antioxidants.
Oh, they actually worked.
To a degree, yes. They were essentially creating early, mild sunscreens based on deep generational observation.
And it isn't just ancient history either. Looking at the source material, there are traditional indigenous practices still heavily in use today that rely on natural pastes.
Oh, definitely.
For example, the Sama-Bajo people, they're nomadic seafarers in Southeast Asia. They use a paste called borax.
Right, the waterweed paste.
Yeah, water weeds, rice, and spices. They wear it to protect their faces from the incredibly harsh sun that reflects off the sea.
Because reflected UV radiation is incredibly potent, so a physical paste is a brilliant adaptation. And you see similar adaptations elsewhere, too.
Like where?
Well, in Myanmar, there's a long tradition of using thanaka, which is a yellow-white paste made from ground tree bark.
Okay.
And in Madagascar, they use mason joni. That's a ground wood paste that has served dual purposes for sun protection and beautiful facial decoration since, like, the 18th century.
That's amazing.
Yeah, these are incredibly effective, thick physical barriers.
But eventually we had to move from physical wood pastes to the invisible lotions we use today.
Yeah.
And looking at the research, the scientific turning point actually happened in 1820.
Yes, Sir Everard Home.
Right. An English physician who made a massive conceptual leap. He realized, through experimentation, that sunburns aren't just caused by the sun's thermal heat.
Exactly. I mean, before that moment, people largely assumed a sunburn was literally just a burn, like touching a hot stove.
Right, like if it's hot, you burn.
Exactly. But once it was established that invisible ultraviolet rays radiation you can't even feel were causing the cellular damage, the entire scientific approach shifted.
The game totally changed.
It did. The race was suddenly on to find substances that could specifically block those invisible wavelengths.
Which leads to some truly wild experiments. By the 1930s, modern chemical sunscreens were being born globally.
Yeah, the early chemistry days were intense.
Tell me about it. In Australia, a chemist named A.J. Milton Blake created an early commercial product using tannic acid. But the one that really caught my eye was in Germany.
Oh, the IG Farben guys?
Yes. Scientists at the chemical company IG Farben were literally hiking up freezing mountain peaks, like the Jungfraujoch in the Alps, just to test early chemical filters on themselves.
It's wild to think about.
They were enduring freezing temperatures at high altitudes, where the UV radiation is intensely strong, just to see if their chemical mixtures could stop their skin from reddening while still allowing it to tan.
It's a testament to how badly we wanted to solve this problem. But the real catalyst for mass production, as with so many technologies, was the military.
Right, World War II.
Yeah, during World War II, the U.S. military had a massive crisis on its hands. Soldiers stationed in the Pacific Theater were getting absolutely roasted by the tropical sun, to the point where it was a serious operational hazard.
So in 1944, an airman and pharmacist named Benjamin Green steps up and invents something called Red Vet Pet.
Red veterinary petrolatum.
Yeah. I just have to imagine what this was like. It sounds like they were literally basting soldiers in a thick, sticky red petroleum jelly.
Basically, yeah.
Let me push back on this, though. Did that red jelly actually offer any kind of sophisticated chemical protection, or was it just an incredibly uncomfortable, suffocating physical barrier?
Oh, it was almost entirely an uncomfortable physical barrier.
I knew it.
Yeah, it was incredibly thick, messy, and ruined clothing. It essentially worked by standing like a brick wall between the skin and the sun's rays. It was highly effective at stopping a burn, but absolutely terrible to wear.
Sounds miserable.
But, you know, that messy red jelly was the vital predecessor to modern commercial sunscreens. In fact, Green later mixed that concept with cocoa butter and coconut oil, which eventually became the brand Coppertone.
Oh, wow. I had no idea that's where Coppertone came from. And right around that same time, in 1946, an Austrian chemist named Franz Greiter got a terrible sunburn while climbing a mountain called Pisbuen.
Another mountain climber.
Right. He went home, hit the lab, and created glacier cream. That cream became the foundation for the brand Pisbuen, which is still huge today. But what blew my mind is that Greiter is actually the guy who later, in 1974, introduced the concept of SPF, the sun protection factor.
Yes, he gave us the metric we all use today to measure UV protection, though it is quite humbling to realize that his original glacier cream from the 1940s is estimated to have had an SPF of about 2.
SPF 2. Today, we wouldn't even consider that sunscreen.
Not at all.
So let's fast forward from Greiter's SPF 2 and messy red petroleum jelly to the highly engineered products we have now. What exactly are these modern creams doing on a cellular level?
Well, the science breaks down into two main categories of UV filters. You have mineral, which are also called physical filters, and chemical, which are also known as organic filters.
Okay, let's start with the mineral ones. Those typically use inorganic compounds like zinc oxide and titanium dioxide, right?
Right. And historically, people thought these worked entirely by reflecting the sun.
Like a mirror.
Exactly. But we now know that while they do reflect and scatter a small percentage of UV light, acting like millions of microscopic mirrors sitting on top of your skin, their primary mechanism is actually absorbing the UV radiation, but they sit purely on the surface.
Now, chemical sunscreens or organic filters operate a bit differently because they use specific carbon-based molecular structures.
They do.
I always like to use this analogy. If a thick mineral sunscreen is like a literal shield deflecting incoming arrows, a chemical sunscreen is like a microscopic sponge.
That's a great way to think about it.
It absorbs that dangerous high-energy UV radiation, undergoes a harmless chemical reaction, and wrings that energy out as low-energy heat that simply dissipates off your skin.
That is a highly accurate and brilliant way to visualize the mechanism. The molecular bonds in the chemical sunscreen catch the radiation, vibrate, and release it as heat.
That's so cool.
And both of these types of filters are tasked with absorbing two very different, very dangerous types of rays, UVB and UVA.
Let's break those down because the difference is critical. UVB is the radiation that causes the immediate visible sunburns. It's the one that sends you home looking like a lobster.
Right.
But UVA penetrates much deeper into the skin's layers.
Precisely. UVA rays are insidious. They don't primarily cause that painful surface burn, so you don't even know you're being damaged.
Oh, that's scary.
It is. Instead, they penetrate deep into the dermis and cause cellular DNA damage. They are the primary driver of melanoma and other skin cancers.
So UVA is the silent killer and UVB is the visible alarm bell.
Exactly.
But here's the part of the research that I think is going to absolutely floor anyone listening right now. We always hear sunscreen is good for anti-aging, but the data is astounding.
It really is.
A massive 4.5-year study of 900 people in Australia showed that daily broad-spectrum sunscreen use flat out prevented the development of wrinkles and sagging skin.
Yep, completely halted it.
And even more incredibly, a separate 12-week study showed that daily use of SPF 30 actually reversed existing photoaging.
That's one that always surprises people.
Right. Now, I have to be the skeptic here. When the researchers say reverse, do they mean a lotion literally reverses the arrow of time on a wrinkle, or is something else happening biologically?
It's not a time machine, unfortunately, but the visible effect is profound.
Okay, so what's happening?
Here is what's actually going on. The sun is constantly causing micro-injuries to your skin's collagen and elastin. Your skin is incredibly resilient and is always trying to repair this damage.
Makes sense.
But imagine you are trying to rebuild a brick house, and while you are laying the mortar, someone is continuously throwing new bricks at the walls. You can never catch up.
You're just constantly doing damage control.
Exactly. When you start using sunscreen diligently every single day, you finally put a barrier up. You stop the barrage of bricks.
Oh.
And because the skin is no longer forced to constantly fight off new acute UV damage, its natural regenerative processes can finally take over and focus on repairing the older existing damage.
So clinically, you see a visible reversal of photoaging. Dark spots fade, texture improves, and fine lines diminish.
Exactly.
So the absolute best, most scientifically proven anti-aging cream on the market is just standard, everyday SPF.
Without a doubt.
But it's not just those active UV filters, the sponges and mirrors doing all the heavy lifting, right? The inactive ingredients play a massive role.
Immensely. Formulating a good sunscreen is about creating an entire defensive ecosystem.
Okay, how so?
Because realistically, no UV filter is 100% perfect. Even the best ones let a tiny fraction of UV light slip through. When that light hits your skin, it generates free radicals.
Such a bad.
Very bad. They're unstable molecules that rip through your cells and damage your DNA. To combat this, formulators add antioxidants like vitamin C and E into the inactive ingredient list.
So if the UV filters are the frontline troops taking the brunt of the attack, the antioxidants are the medics working right behind them.
That's exactly right. They neutralize any free radicals that slip past the primary defenses before those radicals can mutate your cells.
That is fascinating.
And additionally, many tinted sunscreens include iron oxides. Research shows iron oxides offer significant protection against high-energy visible light, or blue light.
Oh, from screens and stuff.
From the sun mostly, but yes, blue light. We are now discovering that it also contributes heavily to skin aging and hyperpigmentation.
Okay, so if this product is essentially a medical marvel, a literal fountain of youth that prevents deadly cancers, why is there so much fear-mongering and regulatory panic surrounding it?
It's a really valid question.
Because it feels like every summer there is a new terrifying headline about sunscreen being toxic.
The regulatory environment is indeed very complex. Currently, the FDA categorizes sunscreen ingredients based on safety profiles. They use a designation called GRACE, generally recognized as safe and effective.
Right.
As of right now, only 2 ingredients, zinc oxide and titanium dioxide, the mineral filters, hold that permanent GRACE status.
Which naturally makes consumers anxious about the chemical filters, especially because older chemical ingredients like PABA were actually banned recently in 2021 due to severe allergic contact dermatitis.
Yes, PABA was a real issue.
So why is the FDA holding back on the modern chemical filters?
Well, the FDA is requiring more safety data on organic chemical filters, largely because modern testing shows that these chemicals are absorbed through the skin and into the human bloodstream.
Oh, okay. That sounds a little scary.
It does, but this is a crucial point. The FDA has not concluded that these filters are unsafe or toxic.
They just don't know for sure yet.
Exactly. Absorption does not automatically equal harm. However, because they enter the bloodstream, the FDA wants rigorous pharmaceutical-level data to be absolutely certain there are no long-term systemic effects.
That makes sense. It's an abundance of caution, not a declaration of danger.
Precisely.
But then we had the massive benzene scare a couple of years ago. People were tossing out brand new bottles of sunscreen left and right because they heard it caused cancer.
I remember that well.
But looking at the actual data from the sources, the carcinogen benzene is not a sunscreen ingredient. Nobody is formulating lotion with benzene.
No, absolutely not. This is a perfect example of why understanding the manufacturing process is so critical. Independent testing by a lab called Valger found benzene in about 27% of the aerosol spray sunscreens they tested.
Right.
But the benzene wasn't the sunscreen. It was an impurity stemming from the butane propellants used in the aerosol spray cans.
So it was a manufacturing contamination issue with the spray mechanism itself, not a fundamental flaw with the active sunscreen ingredient.
Exactly.
Still, it led to massive voluntary recalls and a lot of public distrust. But let me step into the shoes of a skeptical consumer for a second, because there's another huge debate that always pops up: vitamin D.
Ah, yes, the vitamin D debate.
If I am diligently blocking all the UVB rays, and UVB rays are exactly what trigger my skin to produce vitamin D, aren't I just treating skin cancer for brittle bones and a massive vitamin D deficiency?
It is probably the most common pushback dermatologists hear, but the clinical math is very clear. Regular sunscreen use does not lead to vitamin D deficiency.
Really? How is that possible?
First of all, no sunscreen blocks 100% of UVB rays. Even a perfectly applied high SPF sunscreen lets a small percentage of UVB through, which is more than enough to trigger vitamin D synthesis.
And there's an evolutionary mechanism at play too, right?
Yeah.
You can't just stand in the sun all day and stockpile vitamin D like a battery.
Yeah, precisely. The skin reaches an equilibrium very quickly. After just a short period of unprotected exposure, further UV exposure actually starts degrading vitamin D just as fast as it creates it.
Wait, it degrades it?
Yes, it's an evolutionary protective mechanism, so your body doesn't reach toxic levels of the vitamin. You physically cannot overdose on sun-created vitamin D.
So standing in the sun for 4 hours without protection isn't banking extra nutrients. It's literally just destroying your cellular DNA for zero added benefit.
Exactly. And more importantly, the catastrophic risks of sun-induced skin cancer heavily outweigh the perceived benefits of unprotected sun time.
Especially since you can just get it elsewhere.
Right. Adequate amounts of vitamin D are easily and safely obtained through diet, like fatty fish and fortified milk, or through simple supplements.
Okay, so we know it's safe, we know it's necessary. What does this all mean for the confusing numbers on the bottle? Let's talk about the math of SPF and what I like to call the user error trap.
This is where things get really practical.
Because despite all this brilliant science, practically everyone is using this stuff wrong. Let's define the terms first. SPF 15 means exactly 115th of the burning radiation reaches your skin. SPF 50 means 150th reaches the skin.
Correct.
But here's the massive misconception I hear all the time. People think SPF 50 lasts longer than SPF 15.
That is perhaps the single most dangerous myth about sun protection.
It's not true.
Not at all. A higher SPF blocks a higher percentage of rays in any given moment, but the physical product itself breaks down, sweats off, and degrades at the exact same rate regardless of the number on the bottle.
Oh, wow.
Whether you wear SPF 15 or SPF 100, you must reapply it every 2 hours. It does not buy you more time in the sun.
And remember, SPF only measures UVB, the burning rays. To know if you're protected from the cancer-causing UVA rays, you have to decode an entire Wild West of global metrics.
It is a mess.
It really is. The EU requires a specific UVA seal. The UK uses the Boot Star rating system, where 5 stars means you have the best ratio of UVA to UVB protection.
And in Asia.
Asian brands use the PA system, which is based on a testing method called persistent pigment darkening. In that system, PA+++ is incredibly high UVA protection.
But here is the catch. All of these metrics, the SPF numbers, the PA ratings, the star ratings, assume one crucial, fundamental thing.
Which is?
That you are applying the sunscreen exactly the way it is applied in a laboratory testing environment. And almost nobody does.
The great application failure.
Yes.
When the FDA tests a product to certify it as SPF 50, they test it based on an application thickness of 2 milligrams per square centimeter of skin.
Which sounds completely abstract.
Totally abstract. But for an average adult body, that equates to about 35 milliliters of lotion.
Yeah.
That's a full shot glass
Yeah.
or a golf ball-sized amount just for one single application.
Not a lot.
And for just your face and neck, it's about 1/4 to 1/3 of a teaspoon.
And if you've ever actually measured out a 1/4 teaspoon of thick sunscreen and tried to rub it into your face, you know it is a lot of product.
It takes a minute to rub in.
Studies consistently show that most people only apply 25% to 50% of that required laboratory amount.
And this is where the math gets genuinely terrifying. I always use a seatbelt analogy for this.
Okay, let's hear.
Buying an expensive SPF 100, but only applying a thin, cosmetically elegant little layer is like installing a heavy-duty 5-point racing harness in your car, but only clicking one buckle across your waist.
That's a perfect analogy.
You feel like you're fully protected, but you're fundamentally compromising the entire system.
Yeah.
Just how drastically does the math change when we underapply?
It changes exponentially, not linearly.
Wait, Really?
Yes, if you apply exactly half the required amount of an SPF 50 sunscreen, you do not get SPF 25.
You don't?
No, because of the physics of how multiple layers of light-absorbing molecules stack on top of each other, the drop-in protection is massive. You actually get closer to the square root of the SPF value.
A square root.
Yes, so half an application of SPF 50 might only be giving you an SPF of around 7.
Wow. So you buy SPF 50, you put a comfortable thin layer on, and you walk out into the glaring sun thinking you're wearing an iron shield, but you're actually wearing paper.
That is a massive, dangerous trap for consumers.
I had no idea the drop-off was that steep.
It really is, and the situation is often complicated by mineral sunscreens. Because zinc oxide and titanium dioxide can leave a white, chalky cast on the skin, people are even less likely to apply the correct thick amount of mineral formulas, leaving them severely underprotected.
Which brings us to a conflict that is larger than just our own skin. It's not just humans suffering the consequences of sunscreen habits and formulas, it's the environment.
This is such an important part of the conversation.
We need to talk about global regulations and the coral reef crisis. Because depending on where you live, the sunscreen you use is regulated very differently. In the United States, sunscreen is regulated strictly as an over-the-counter drug.
Right, which means the FDA approval process for any new UV filter is incredibly rigorous, slow, and expensive. It requires extensive animal and human clinical trials. Because of this pharmaceutical bottleneck, there are currently only 17 approved active UV filters in the U.S. And incredibly, the FDA has not approved a single new UV filter since 1999.
1999, that's the year the original Matrix movie came out. We are protecting our skin with dial-up internet-era technology in the U.S.
Oh, we really are.
Meanwhile, Europe, Japan, and Australia regulate sunscreen as a cosmetic.
Yes, and that cosmetic classification allows for much faster research development and innovation. The European Union currently has 29 approved UV filters.
So they have way more options.
They have access to entirely new generations of highly photostable chemical filters that provide exceptional broad-spectrum UVA protection. And crucially, many of these newer large molecule filters aren't absorbed into the bloodstream the way the older 1990s U.S. filters are.
It's a huge, frustrating irony. The U.S. treats sunscreen like a serious pharmaceutical to protect consumers, but by locking down the process, it has totally stifled innovation, leaving Americans to rely on older, greasier, less effective filters.
Exactly.
While Europe treats it like mascara, resulting in vastly superior, broader spectrum protection. But the stakes are much higher than just getting a greasy lotion. The environmental devastation caused by some of these older chemical filters is staggering.
It is an ecological crisis, which is why we are seeing local and regional governments stepping in where federal agencies haven't.
Right.
Hawaii and the island nation of Palau, for example, have flat out banned the sale of sunscreens containing the older chemical filters oxybenzone and octinoxate.
And the research explains exactly why these bans are happening. It's not just a vague idea that chemicals are bad for the environment. The biological mechanisms are brutal.
They are very specific and very damaging.
In sufficient concentrations, these specific chemicals literally damage the DNA of the coral. They induce severe deformities in coral larvae so they can't grow properly.
And it gets worse.
Right. They even awaken dormant viral infections within the coral, causing them to expel their symbiotic algae, which makes the corals incredibly vulnerable to massive bleaching events.
What's truly terrifying is the scale of the toxicity. In laboratory settings, some of these compounds induce complete coral bleaching at incredibly minimal concentrations.
Like just a drop.
Essentially, yes. And in the real world, it's highly concentrated in tourist areas. An assessment in Hawaii's Kahalu Bay found oxybenzone concentrations 262 times higher than what the EPA designates as high risk for marine life.
So we slather this stuff on to go snorkeling, we jump in the water, and it washes off into the bay, creating a highly concentrated toxic bath for the exact beautiful reefs we travel thousands of miles to see.
That's a tragic cycle.
And it's not even just the chemical filters that are the problem. The research points out that even titanium dioxide nanoparticles, the mineral filters that everyone assumes are totally natural and reef safe, can react with UV light in the ocean water to create hydrogen peroxide.
Yes.
And that hydrogen peroxide kills off phytoplankton, which is the foundational base of the entire marine food web.
It creates an incredibly profound tension for all of us. I mean, we have an absolute medical imperative to use sunscreen to prevent fatal skin cancers and severe cellular damage.
Right.
But we are simultaneously facing an ecological imperative to stop poisoning the oceans and killing off the reefs.
So let's summarize this massive journey for everyone listening. We started thousands of years ago with ancient seafarers mixing water weeds and rice paste, and moved through the discovery of invisible UV rays and chemists climbing the freezing Alps.
Quite a history.
We learned that your daily sunscreen is essentially an anti-aging time machine that allows your skin to finally repair cellular damage, but only if you use a full shot glass amount to beat that terrifying square root math of SPF under application.
Don't forget the math.
Never forget the math. And we see this massive ongoing clash where U.S. regulations are stuck in the 1990s while our oceans are silently suffering from the chemical runoff of our beach vacations. The ultimate takeaway here, wear it every single day, apply a lot of it, reapply it constantly. But please, pay close attention to the ingredients, especially if you are swimming in the ocean.
And importantly, look toward the horizon. Because the science of photoprotection isn't stopping with the formulas we have today.
That's the good news.
The research we've been reviewing outlines some incredible cutting-edge development currently underway in laboratories around the world.
Yes. I want to leave you, our listener, with a glimpse into that future. Scientists are right now developing sunscreens based on bioadhesive nanoparticles.
This is fascinating stuff.
Imagine a lotion that encapsulates the UV filters, binds tightly to the very top, dead layer of your skin so it doesn't rub off or wash away in the water, but is completely non-penetrant, meaning it never enters your bloodstream and never washes into the reef.
Furthermore, researchers are heavily studying compounds called synapate esters. These are novel UV filters inspired directly by the natural photoprotection found in plants that have survived under the sun for millions of years.
Think about that. The next great leap in skincare might literally come from mimicking nature itself.
It's coming full circle.
Imagine a future where applying sunscreen isn't a sticky, messy, ecologically guilty chore, but rather donning an invisible, biologically inspired suit of armor, one that completely protects our cells from the ravages of radiation while remaining utterly harmless to the ocean ecosystem.
That's the goal.
So the next time you are standing in that pharmacy aisle staring at the wall of plastic bottles, you aren't just taking a chemistry exam in a swimsuit. You're holding a century of scientific triumph and the key to both your own health and the health of the planet.